Artwork, critiques, Photoshop files, and reference sheets are all available on my Patreon. Well, hello there guys and girls, my name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial. And today we're going to be taking a look at how to draw our anime and manga characters from a low angle perspective. Just a viewpoint where we're looking up towards them and making those characters feel like they're more domineering, authoritarian, or just taking up space because they're big and tall. So really this is going to work for any forms of visual storytelling regardless of what your style and design is, and I'm going to begin by just drawing a very quick reference box for a standard character, and we're just going to break down some very simple shapes and re-describe them from some different angles. So I've just got myself a quick ruler over here to help me draw out with a super cheap disposable mechanical pencil. You don't need to worry about following along at home with this bit, but also I'm just using a whole load of sheets of super cheap printer paper, and I'm just going to quickly do what we've done before with a quick scrap here to rest my hand on, and that is really just draw Little Miss McAnime Lady, and I'm just going to use some basic building blocks to do so. This is going to act as a bit of a guide for our simple shapes in just a moment. So we've got a circle shape for a head, coming down a center line over here and sweeping in a cheek below that circle, stopping on either side. Now I am going to do my best to work as quickly as possible, which does mean that what I do today probably is going to be a bit rough around the edges. It's just about getting the ideas across without making this video too long. And then I've got a column for the neck, and I'm going to sweep in a quick bit of shoulder and hip line just above that halfway point, contrapposto, and then I'm just going to think about a nice generous egg shape coming off of that neck for the chest ribcage area, another elliptical shape on its side for the hips, and I'm just going to go ahead and imagine that even our looking at this character isn't perfectly straight on, but maybe our horizon line, our viewpoint and eye line, is somewhere around about the knees, and we're ever so slightly looking up towards this character. So that means for me, if I've got the center line of the chest here, I'm really going to sweep up the underside of the rib cage quite far, be quite generous with where I've got that chest cavity line in. I'm going to just slightly firm up because we're using a real basic setup today. Just a couple lines up on either side to help meet down the back edges of the neck muscles, and then two generous shoulder circles happening on either side. And with the hips, I'm actually just going to throw in a firm line here, square off across the top, because the bucket of the hips tilts slightly forward when a character's standing up, but we're slightly below. So we're still seeing probably just the flattest front side of the hips situation. Here's our center line, up past the tummy. Let's squeeze it in a little bit on either side to get a slight hint of a female hourglass figure going in, just like so. And then with the legs, I'm going to come from just inside either edge of our hip line, and I'm just going to have this character taking a step towards us, kind of catwalk walking, so that we've got a very kind of close center area where the feet are stepping right across a solid line. So again, I'm just going to think about some knees in some relatively generous knee circles, just being here and here. And let's just sweep down and around for our legs. Again, these are just some columns which are a bit thicker at the top than they are at the bottom. And this is all stuff that we've done many times before. Let's sweep up a V down to the middle here. So if I'm not getting into too much detail or just kind of going through, I've got dedicated tutorials on actually building up your anime and manga ladies from these basic shapes. Right now, we're just having a character just stepping along at a relatively straight on angle, slightly low angle perspective, but nothing too extreme, just so that we can try to do this again in just a moment and really start to mix things up and give this power of gravitas over our characters. So shin line down here, just going to get a little bit thick with the outside part of the calf muscle, a bit thinner on the inside edge, sweep that leg forward, and then drop things down right over here to the feet, front part of the toes, ankles, touch of heel, coming back up, and then same as this leg's kind of disappearing down with the other part of the step, just off of there. Might catch a bit of that trailing leg coming in as well, just somewhere here. So the inside toe is actually going to be on that side, and then on this side, switching over as the legs cross in the background. Okay, very basic form coming up here. Just going to put a little bit of a curved line over the quadriceps just to show you over the meat of the calf. But this leg slightly towards us, this one slightly away. Got our tummy area up here. And then let's just have two nondescript arms coming down either side. We don't need to worry about this too much. Here's a column, here's a shape, here's another cylinder. And then vaguely going to describe a hand shape. Just there and down. And just here. And really, I'm keeping these really basic shapes in this form because the simpler we make the building blocks, the easier we're going to have a time when it comes to the foreshortening. So let's come up here, sweep around the shoulders, either side, V in for the collarbone, and then where the boobs on our character might normally sit, nice and generously below the shoulder line, because we're looking ever so slightly up, I'm going to bring the boob curve just a little bit further up the chest. Still map over the surface here, a bit flatter where it meets against. And I'm not going to do anything too crazy, just two generous boobs just sitting up there, a little bit further up. And we're seeing a bit of a curve over the top because our angle towards them is still a little bit lower, just like so. Okay. So now that we've got this situation out the way, I want to draw in a completely new guide box, and we're going to use this as a rough bit of direction for us when it comes to redescribing this lady again, but with some real foreshortening and some real kind of power stepping out towards us. So I'm just going to make a relatively abstract rectangle. I'm going to give it some interesting angles here as well, so that this kind of perspective is really coming down towards us. And if this is our front-on rectangular box to put a character in, it's a really similar thing here. I'm just using it as a very loose guide. I'm not going to be too strict, just to help me inform my own decision making with where I put the rest of the body parts. Now, when it comes to foreshortening, things that are closer towards us appear to be a bit bigger. They're going to be taking up a bit more space, and as things disappear away from us, it all kind of gets crunched down together. So that means that with our low angle perspective, we're going to be seeing a lot more of the legs and lower part of the body down here from our, let's say, worm's eye view. We're going to be right at ground level. So that means that this halfway point of all the legs and business will take up more than half of our overall perspective area here. So I'm going to put a perspective line that's going to be our slightly diminished halfway point, just a little bit more than halfway up here. And I'm just going to use that as a bit of a guide. I could keep putting in all these other steps, but the more I do that, the more overly rigid it's going to make my thinking process later. I just want this to inform how I'm going to be doing things. So we've got a relatively low angle perspective on these basic shapes. I'm going to anchor everything by starting from the hips. This kind of gentle hip shape, again, this ellipse, I'm just going to very loosely put on here, like so. And now again, I'm going to imagine that, right, we're looking at this kind of bucket shape from a low angle. So if this is our front flat edge here that comes down generously on either side, then the front part of that might stop around about here, but actually I'm going to be seeing right underneath this as well towards the back because of my low angle perspective. So I'm just thinking very roughly about these kind of three-dimensional shapes. This is obviously the socket shape where each leg is going to be plugged in. And again, this is just a bit of a guide. I'm using these hard angles to really accentuate the perspective and the overall directions of these forms, but we can always soften it up in a moment. And then I'm going to think about that front center line going up and back. And then, okay, maybe the top part of the chest area somewhere up here is again just a little bit more diminished, and this is sitting a little bit more directly on top and almost further back than the hips area as we kind of look up and underneath. So again, this kind of chest cavity under area is something that we're looking right from low up and in towards here. There's our center line diminishing right up to the collarbone again. And if I think about just these firmer lines on either side that was just describing that shape build up, I can imagine that they're sitting here and probably just up there accordingly, right across the front. the way the muscles of the tummy meet in just under the rib and dip in ever so slightly before they then come out to the meat of the tummy line over the front there. And I just imagine that front kind of mapping surface. Then from the lower point of the ribs on either side, we've got where the abdominal wall comes in, sweeps out to around about here as it meets into the front bucket of the hips and up round so. And we're really looking up towards this situation. Let's just get in our shoulder circles just here. That one's hiding right behind there. And then we can go just up maybe for the neck, somewhere up here. And then we can sit our head on top. I've started here because I really don't want to start from the top and get all confused as I work my way down. The middle part is a really good anchor point to measure everything out from. So let's just get that hip bone coming in there. Squeeze up around the back to the lats there. And then powerfully over the front there. And then maybe I've got the center line of this character's head somewhere up there. And I'm just going to get that circular shape in as we describe around the top edge towards the back. And then down here, a little bit of cheek flourish bump. Our chin for our characters somewhere protruding here. And then just sweeping up on that other side there. Get an ear shape, just like so. And again, it's all about how much are we seeing and how much is kind of disappearing behind everything. That ear shape is horrible. Let's just give it a quick bit of erasing. Excuse me, everybody. And then just come back in. So let's sweep up that jawline there. Let's get that ear shape right back there, a little bit more solid and firm. And then sweep up around the shape of that head. So the center line of that head's disappearing over the top, right up towards the crown, over the forehead, before it comes back down towards us. So then in terms of the main area that's going to be really stepping out towards us, big powerful leg stance. So I'm going to start again from just inside of the hip areas here. Think about a good long step towards us, something like so, and another step maybe just further away. And again with our knees roughly about halfway, but me just going slightly further up than half of this bottom section, because again, as this leg comes towards us, we're going to see more and more of the shin and the lower part instead. So I've got a generous circle that I'm just implying in there, and I'm going to be imagining a very simple column shape, and just keeping it simple because I want to think about the angle. I'm going to think, right, the bottom part of that column is around about here. We're looking right down from the underside, and although it might just feel like a straight line going up here, we're of course keeping it much more meaty and thick around the outside edge, just as we like to do for those big thighs. So sweeping up round there before then really following a natural curve that's coming right out, up and over where we've got these hard hip edges. Let's get that nice thigh curve coming all the way out and down here. And then as it meets into the front area here with the hip flexors, I'm just going to bring that out again and sweep nicely over the front, curving down towards the circle for our knee, somewhere like so. And then just thinking about a very similar thing for the rest of the leg coming down. If this is our knee area, and we'll go into the details in just a sec, let's just think, right, another cylindrical shape coming down for the lower part of the leg that's going to be finishing around about here because we've still got the foot. And I'm just going to imagine that, okay, well, we've got all the kind of straighter curved lines of the shin coming along here, a little bit of bump just on this section here before we sweep down, and then plenty of bump as we get the meat of the calf, again following a curve from our circle. Let's get the meat of the calf really just sweeping down there before coming in towards the shin. And then a few construction bits in the middle. We've got the kneecap around about here. We've got the meat of the muscles on either side here and here of the leg as it comes down towards us. Underside of the kneecap there. Everything is coming together here. So I've got that nice line that comes in here. A straighter line as everything connects around the back and then comes around to the calf. Everything's kind of netted into each other, just like so. If you can imagine this part of the quadriceps sweeping right up around there. And then as we come down here, just going to put in a circle for our joint for the ankle. And then let's get our heel dropping off here the front part of the foot coming down quite nicely as well. And then I'm just going to separate off what will be the front area of the foot with most of the toes. Big toe over here. That all sweeps over the top arch. Then we've got our ankle joints. Lower on the outside than the inside. And just meeting that together. So this isn't a full-on how to draw feet tutorial. So again, excuse me how all of our basic building block shapes right now are relatively simply constructed. But it's all about changing these shapes for the sake of that foreshortening. Down the front of the knee, the front of the shin, over the top of the foot, right down to the split in the toe, and then all the way up, back, over the meat of the leg. So we come back up to the body there. So then we've got a similar thing going on with the other leg as that other trailing step is happening. So I can now imagine that, right, this curve that I've quite enjoyed is sweeping down to another knee, pretty much circle for circle behind things here. So I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to really get that nice hourglass curve, that really kind of bell jar feeling by sweeping right down here. Let's get a shape going in there and have this leg coming back. Obviously, we're going to get a lot more of the inside of the hip flexors happening here. I'm just going to squeeze that leg in and around as well. Coming back there, getting a load of probably bump and curve of the bum that we're seeing from the lower inside edge. And then that straight line, if we've got our knees here, I'm still going to get some straight shin happening here. Leg curving away, sweeping up and thickening out just here and just there. Being a little bit simpler with this one as it diminishes off from behind away from us. And again, just thinking about, right, there's our ankle situation. There's our foot coming down, big toe on the inside edge, sweeping down around about here. Let's get those ankles in, just like so. And the heel right back there. Center line, back up the shin, following up along the leg, back over to the front. So that we've got this stepping action again, but now that we're so much lower down near floor level looking up towards this character, it's a real big powerful stepping stride. This lady is oozing power and dominance in the particular scenario. So let's just get some casual bit of arm going on here. Let's have this one just slightly swinging back because she's stepping towards us. So again, I'm just using some standard cylindrical shapes just for now. Let's come up here. Here's our elbow area just on that outside edge as this arm comes in. It's tucking to the armpit area to the front of the chest there. We've got some strong shoulders all the way up here. And then this arm can just be casually coming a bit further down towards the front as it swings in with that step. So same thing, we've got the columns, but now those columns are sweeping down towards us. So I'm just thinking that we're seeing things a little bit more foreshortened with the flatter ends pointing towards us of these arms. Down here. And then just over here. And again, I'm just going to be very, very vague with our hand shapes for the moment. Just so we've got some vague paddles going in. So let's go here. And diminishing away. Back there. Let's bring this one up just a little bit. And then just to give you an idea, let's just go around the surface of that leg again, where we've got this line relatively flat on, but just curving a little bit. Now you can see that is coming right towards us. See how that curve of that cylinder is shooting down in our direction all the way down to here. And things only start to flatten out and look even when they're down at our eye level, which just happens to be right down at the bottom of the foot, where that line is finally flat. But the more we look up our character, the more these surface curves are accentuated even further, right up to the brow, curving right out over the front. And even with the breasts of this character, again, instead of hanging too low down as they might be when we look front on. We're actually thinking about things mapping over a much higher area of the chest. So we might see, if this is a generously busted character, the boob curve right over the top, right over here, coming in and around. And remember, these boobs are like soft water balloons of joy. It means that when they hit against the surface of the chest, they're still not following a complete circle. They're going to be a little bit flatter against the firm surface of the chest itself, mapping that area around as they meet up towards the armpits, mapping over the curve of that chest there. So this boob as well, a bit flatter as it's down there, but coming out quite generously from our perspective, which is underneath. So let's come all the way around here, just like so. Center lining, something up that way, and something up that way. Okay guys, so that gives us a bit of an idea of what's going on with this vanishing perspective. I'm going to firm up these shapes a little bit, but also give us plenty more examples. Let's take a look at another full-scale low-angle perspective character. This one will keep it smaller, more childlike, and talk about the relationship of the different sizes. Then we'll have a go at getting really extreme, really under all the business, and also another look from the back. So I'll see you then. Hello there guys, and welcome back. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can map your anime and manga characters from a low angle perspective, looking up towards things and making them feel a bit more powerful. I will of course scan this in, so if you'd like to grab a copy of this exact thing, you can grab it along with all the rest from my tutorials work pack for just $1 on Patreon. But really what we're doing is breaking down a character into these building block shapes and then just trying to think about those simple forms firstly, like cylinder shapes for the leg that we're looking up towards, and just mapping the body back on top of things. Also, we're working with a diminishing perspective here so that the things that are nearest to us are going to appear to be a bit larger. So I might have a halfway point for the body here, but really I've given myself more than half of the assigned area to work in to help guide my decision making over to the legs, because they're closer to us, they're going to be appearing larger, and the rest of the body is slowly diminishing away from us. The line of the boobs appears further up the chest now because we're no longer level on, we can't see the collarbone area. We're going to be seeing more into the underside and cavity of the chest, so that curve is accentuated even more than it is over here. And where we've got our eye level, where we're really looking from, which in this example is right at the floor, that's where things appear flat on towards us. The feet appear flat on, but as we start to look up from our extreme perspective here, we're getting a bit of curve to the leg. We're starting to see even more surface curve all the way around up towards the hips, because our angle is starting to really catch the underneath of everything all the way up to the chest and the head. And all the time these things are getting slightly smaller as they diminish away and getting slightly more contracted together. Then we've got examples of maybe just younger characters, even if they might have relatively skinny legs. I'm thinking about the fact that this kind of foreshortening and perspective is coming towards us, so I'm actually keeping things relatively thick around about here, down by the shin and the ankle. And when you've got limbs and angles going off at different planes, we've obviously been working up and down, I try not to give myself too much of a headache and I just kind of guesstimate it in. So I've got this leg going off in a different direction now, but I've just measured out this distance here, make sure it's relatively correct to this distance here, and just have this leg and just levered it back at the knee joint and just drawn it in accordingly, just making sure that it all visually feels okay without knocking my head against a brick wall too much about the perspective going off at a slightly different angle. Even when you've got limbs that are just coming slightly more towards us, it's always going to start to shorten up, unless of course you're going to start T-posing your characters back out. And then of course, looking from the rear. Now remember that we've got the hips and the pelvis tilted ever so slightly forward for most standing characters, and in this example I just thought about that by mapping out a geometric shape for myself and just showing myself the underside of this box shape that I had up here for the hips, just so that I knew that we were going to be seeing up towards the back of the bum a little bit. Everything's getting quite shallow as the back curves in from our viewpoint before it comes up and around. So as this character's looking back over their shoulder, because of our lower angle, that shoulder's obscuring part of the face, we're looking up in from the side, and we're still seeing the legs meet into the underside of the bum as cylinders, really, just meeting into these big circular spherical shapes, letting all of that construction do the work and guide some of our lines. And of course, I just wanted to give you guys an example of coming even closer in and really just getting right underneath the business and taking a look. So we've got real extreme perspective happening here, where we're much closer to the legs, and we're starting to think about things like the front part of the hips at either side have that bony protrusion, and that's now going to start to actually become a line that guides us in. They're popping forward. Obviously, we've got the curves of the tummy, but the entire abdominal wall area here is much flatter onto us now. So I just wanted to map that this surface is just curving over like so, even though it's so much more condensed. And regardless of how generous you are with the boobs of a character, where they sit against the actual chest or rib cage, they're going to follow and flatten against that curve. So guys, that's another one in our Big Powerful Ladies series that we appear to be doing right now. Thank you very much for watching along, and of course, a great big shout out to the January patrons, including Isn't It Romantic, Say No Black, Silent Lumberjack, Mumbles45, Dan, Nathan, Jai, Traylon B, Mike T, and Hamongchi L. I hope you guys have a bloody lovely week, and of course let me know what other tutorials you'd like to see in the future. But other than that, take care.